Welcome to Current Affairs. My name is Nathan Robinson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Current Affairs magazine. I am joined today by Dr. Feroze Sidhwa. He is a trauma and general surgeon at San Joaquin General Hospital. Is also the lead organizer of the Gaza Healthcare Letters, available at gazahealthcareletters.org, from healthcare professionals who have worked in Gaza. And he was the author of recent New York Times op-ed, 65 Doctors, Nurses, and Paramedics, What We Saw in Gaza. Dr. Sidhwa worked in Gaza himself earlier this year and has written a number of accounts explaining what he saw there. Dr. Sidhwa, thank you for joining us on Current Affairs today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to just read a little bit from your latest Gaza letter, which was co-signed by 99 American physicians and nurses. And you say in that, we are 99 American physicians and nurses who have witnessed crimes beyond comprehension, crimes that we cannot believe you wish to continue supporting. This is addressed to the Biden-Harris administration. Please meet with us to discuss what we saw and why we feel American policy in the Middle East must change immediately. President Biden and Vice President Harris, we wish you could see the nightmares that plague so many of us since we've returned. Dreams of children maimed and mutilated by our weapons, their inconsolable mothers begging us to save them. We wish you could hear the cries and screams our consciences will not let us forget. We cannot fathom why you continue arming the country that's deliberately killing these children en masse. You asked the Biden administration in that letter to meet with you. I want to first ask, have you received any response from the Biden-Harris administration?
No, I actually get all sorts of people forwarding me the automated emails that they get when they email the Biden administration asking them to meet with us, and then they forward the automated email to me, and they say, "Oh, I can't believe it's just an automated email." And I say, "Well, that's more than I've gotten actually." So, no, they literally not. I have not received so much as an acknowledgement of the letter from either Biden or Harris or anybody associated with them.
I want to break down. This is not the first letter either that you have sent to the Biden-Harris administration. You've been working since you came back from Gaza to draw attention to what you call in here crimes beyond comprehension. Perhaps you could tell us a little more about those crimes beyond comprehension that you and these dozens and dozens of other healthcare workers have witnessed in Gaza.
Sure. Me and a good number of other people who signed that letter have worked in other combat zones, in other war zones, in other humanitarian disaster zones. Like myself, I've worked in southern Zimbabwe, in Haiti, in Burkina Faso, and in Ukraine 3 times during the Russian invasion. And Gaza is altogether unique. I've never really seen anything like it. It's in a lot of different ways. One, the first is just the sheer scale of killing relative to the size of the place. It's completely unprecedented. A UN report noted that you'd have to go back to the Rwandan genocide of 1994 to find a time when a population was obliterated at this fast of a rate, as long as you adjust by the population, the size of the population. In other words, what percentage of the population was killed at what rate. And that's only going by the official numbers, incidentally, the numbers from the Ministry of Health, which don't include anything such as starvation and deaths from infections, deaths from displacement, things like that. So specifically what we witnessed were a few things. Number one, me personally, I was at European Hospital. Every day that we were there, we had huge mass casualty events. This is a 220-bed hospital. It's not, some massive behemoth of a place. We would regularly, on a daily basis, get mass casualty events that involved anywhere from a dozen to 60 people. I mean, it was completely insane. As in any mass casualty event, most of them were lightly injured, which was good. But we had huge numbers of children that were badly injured, lots and lots of people that needed operations. And Gaza European Hospital has 4 operating rooms. Actually, I still remember there was a moment where we had a man who had been shot in both sides of his chest. He had had chest tubes put in another hospital and was transferred to us. When he got to us, his blood pressure was very low. His left chest tube was putting out a lot of blood. So I said that he needs to go upstairs to have his chest opened and surgically repaired. And the hospital just said no. They said there's no way to do that. There's no space. There's no time. There's no one to run the anesthetic machine there, so you just can't do it. And thankfully he didn't end up, I just managed him at the bedside, did a few things, and he survived, but, or at least he survived until I left. But, so the massive number of civilians, and even if you just assume it's not true, but even if you were to assume that every male of combat age was a combatant, which they certainly weren't. Even if you were to assume that, the huge numbers of just women and children coming in who were obviously civilians was just absolutely insane. It was beyond anything that any hospital of any size could possibly handle. And the injuries that we were seeing were just they were just incredibly, they were maiming. The bombs that we're sending the Israelis are just incredibly powerful. They're meant to be dropped on bunkers, reinforced military structures, mountains, things like that. They're not meant to be dropped on poorly constructed apartment buildings, and they're certainly not meant to be dropped on tents. So you can imagine the injuries we saw were just outrageous. A second crime, at least I'm not a lawyer, but I would call it a crime, that we saw was the deliberate destruction of the healthcare system, and that took on multiple, or I don't know, that was done in multiple ways. One was the targeting of healthcare workers, and it was very, very clear that healthcare workers were a deliberate target of the attack. Multiple people. So the staff at European hospitals in the south of Gaza. It's in Khan Younis, on the southeastern edge of Khan Younis. And I was there from March 25th to April 8th, which is when the Israelis were conducting their fourth and last raid on Shifa Hospital. So a lot of the staff of Shifa had fled, and a lot of them had also been taken in the previous raids of the hospital. And when they were released in the south. So then they came to European Hospital and just started working because they didn't have anything else to do. They weren't paid. They just felt that was the right thing to do. I shouldn't say literally, the large majority of them said that when they were taken, they were actually taken from outside the hospital after the hospital was being emptied and everybody was being forcibly evacuated. And as they walked, they said, "You in the scrubs, you in the scrubs, you in the white coat, you come here." So it was quite clear that they were deliberately picking out healthcare workers of any variety for interrogation, whatever it might have been. So that was one aspect. The other aspect is just the raw physical destruction of a huge number of hospitals in Gaza. It's commonly said that Gaza has 36 hospitals. That's not really true. In terms of anything that you or I would recognize as a hospital, there's four. There's Shifa, there's Indonesian, there's European, and there's Nasser Medical Complex on the western side of Khan Younis, or maybe in Rafah. I can't remember now. But those are the only four that you would actually recognize as being a hospital. They have a blood bank, they have an significant operative capacity, they have an emergency capacity, they have a pharmacy that's well stocked, they have a blood bank, things like that. And we've been in a situation where only two of those four are operational at any given moment, and of those four, European is the only one that has not been physically invaded by the Israeli military and just had everything inside of it destroyed. So that's a major problem. Every time, you can't just destroy everything in a hospital and then let the doctors back in later and say, "Oh, look, we have a hospital again." No, you don't. You just have a building where doctors happen to be inside of it. So that was the second thing. And then the third thing was just the starving of the healthcare system with supplies. So, we only had basically what we brought in with us, and now you can't even take anything in with you because you have to go through Israel. You can't go through Rafah anymore. So those three things were major issues. Yeah. And, there were plenty of other things. The starvation was very obvious. There was a lot.
Yeah. I want to break some of it down. So one of the things that you mentioned there is that the official death toll statistics are hovering somewhere over 40,000 and have hovered there for a long time. One of the things that your letters have argued is that there is very good evidence that the actual death toll is substantially higher. I believe you peg it closer to 100, well over 100,000. Could you explain why it is that you and other healthcare professionals are confident that, in fact, the death toll in Gaza is far higher than has been reported?
Yeah. So I just to clarify what we were trying to say there, it's not that we're confident or we're not confident. It's that going by the available data, the data that actually exists, it's impossible to conclude that the death toll is less than 118,000. But I'll tell you why. So the official death count that's given by the Ministry of Health, the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is kind of widely impugned, but because it's obviously part of the government in Gaza, which is run by Hamas. But the numbers that come out of there have been verified in several different ways by several different academic groups, both before October 7th and since then. There's absolutely no question whatsoever that the deaths they're reporting are real deaths and that they're actually deaths by violence. They're only reporting people who actually show up to morgues. This is a very important thing to understand. There was a time when the Gaza Media Office was also included in the count because the whole system was basically their entire electronic system for morgue for capturing and relaying to a central database what the morgues were finding. That was completely down. I think that was around like November and December, when Shifa was attacked again. But now the Ministry of Health has the morgue system relatively functional and relatively accessible. And so the numbers that are there are only bodies that have shown up to morgues. Now, I will tell you that actually it was the day before I got to this is just an anecdote, obviously, but the day before I got to European Hospital, there was a bombing in a displaced persons area, so tents, right? A lot of these people were just shredded. I mean, like they were just they were dismembered. Their heads over there, their arms are over there, their chest is somewhere else. And somebody just kind of didn't know what to do, so he put all those body parts in a pickup truck and just drove it to European Hospital. Well, those people aren't going to be identified. I mean, you can make maybe a gross estimate of there's 12 bodies in here or something. There's no way to know who they are. It'll never be known if they're men, women, or children. So such people are not counted in the dead. Actually, the Washington Post had a long article. I'm pretty sure it was the Post just recently, maybe 2 weeks ago now. This is to their credit. They had a long article about Gaza, about deaths in Gaza, told by family members that there's no way they're counted in the dead. People buried under buildings, people who were simply vaporized during an attack, people who were shredded so badly that they'll never be able to be identified. These are major problems. The number of people that are estimated to be buried under the rubble has been 10,000, but that's since like January. Mm-hmm. I don't know how it hasn't gone up because nobody really has any way of counting. But then the most significant part of the death toll that's not being reported and really should be included in the death toll in this particular war is deaths from starvation and its complications. It's important I was on another podcast with another fellow. It's just important to remember that people don't starve to death in the way the layperson has an understanding of this. The large majority of people who die because of malnutrition die of an infection. They don't die looking like a victim from Auschwitz. They'll be skinny, of course, but they won't be the literal skeleton that we think of when we think of starvation during the Holocaust or during African famines, things like that. The large majority of such people die of infections. And they are very likely to be dying in their tents. They're very likely to be dying in places that are inaccessible, and so they just can't get to a hospital, where they don't even have, maybe cell service, or they don't have electricity to charge a cell phone. There's all sorts of reasons that these people may not be counted in any official death toll. They're certainly not counted as deaths by violence because they're not. But in this case, in a lot, the way Alex DeWall, he's the main historian of famine in the modern period, the way he put it in a Guardian article maybe a few months ago now, maybe 4 or 5 months ago now, was wars are often starvation crime scenes. I think that's the way he termed it. And that's correct. But in this case, the starvation is very clearly deliberate. It's not even remotely, it's not hidden by anyone unless they happen to be talking to an American reporter. So it's perfectly obvious that the starvation is deliberate and on purpose. And if you look at the data that exists, which admittedly isn't very good, but the data that exists from the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, which is the major group that monitors, the major technical group that monitors starvation and food problems in the world. If you look at their data, there's just no way to conclude that less than 62,000 people have died of starvation. That's a huge number. Remember, most of these are not most, I shouldn't say that. A very large proportion of these are going to be children under the age of 5. So you're talking about a huge death toll. But to us, the point wasn't to say that there's great data to show that this many people have died, because there isn't. The point we were trying to make is that there's no way to estimate less than that based on the available data. And it's kind of shocking to think that we don't even know if we've starved tens of thousands of children to death in Gaza. That's scary.
Now, we've talked there just about deaths, but I'd like to talk about more about the harm inflicted on the living, people who survive. I mean, one of the accounts that comes up over and over in the testimonies that you collected from doctors who worked in Gaza is people saying they feel like they're waiting for death, or that or children who say they wish they died, or they want to die. So perhaps you could talk about the kind of the living hell that has been created for survivors who have to live with these terrible disabilities, who can't be treated properly, who have to live with the trauma of the things that they've seen, of the family members they've seen shredded before their eyes. Perhaps you could tell us more about what happens to those people who don't in fact get killed.
There is obviously just the physical ailments that people are dealing with, the displacement, the total social disruption, not having anywhere to even go to the bathroom. Right in its report Water War Crimes, which is really important. I wish more people had read it. It's by Eastern Oxfam. They estimated that when the Mawasi area has 500,000 people in it, there is one toilet for every 4,130 people there. It's just outrageous. I mean, and it's incredibly undignified. And now on top of that, there's actually probably 1 million people in the Mawasi. We don't even know. So there might be one toilet for every 8,000 people in there in that area. It's just totally outrageous. The physical, the disease, that you can imagine that comes from this is just outrageous. It's just incredible. And again, it mostly affects young children. There just aren't that many elderly people in Gaza for it to affect. So there's that. There's the disease, the displacement, the just general horror. But then on top of that, there's a few groups that I really think their mental health should be highlighted, or the attack on their mental health should be highlighted. Number one is healthcare workers themselves. Every healthcare worker I met, with maybe a marginal exception, really felt that they were going to die during this war. They didn't feel like, and it's important to remember that these people are supposed to have a special protected status in international law. But despite that, they're literally being targeted by the Israelis. It's really wild. They very much felt that they were just waiting for the next bomb to drop on them, and they just buried themselves in their work until that happened. It was kind of shocking to see. Actually, that was actually one of the things that we really wanted. It was one of the things that we realized, that we are providing them some semblance of safety by being at their hospital with them. The Israelis might still attack it, but they at least won't just drop a bomb on it from the air. That's very unlikely. They've done it still, but they are less likely when there's a big contingent of foreign physicians there. The second group of people are children. I mean, I just think about it in your own life. How many children, meaning toddlers and preteens, have you ever seen that were suicidal? That's not a common phenomenon at all. I haven't seen that anywhere else in the world, and just to be clear, neither has anybody else. This is one of the few things that's actually widely discussed by professionals. Is the fact that children are wildly suicidal in the Gaza Strip. That's very, very uncommon. Very uncommon. It speaks to the incredible psychiatric distress that they're undergoing. And again, it's not that surprising when you think about it. For a year, these are children who've had their home destroyed over and 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 over again, sometimes like 15 times. A lot of them have seen their parents killed in front of them. A lot of them have seen their siblings killed in front of them. Almost all of them have seen somebody killed in front of them. It's not, it's just totally outrageous. I mean, it's insane. And then the third thing that I haven't seen this covered much in the media, but I just can't imagine it's not a massive issue, is mothers. Of course, fathers care about their children as well. No, I don't want to pretend otherwise. But there's a woman named Arwa something. I'm forgetting her last name now. She, I believe, is half Syrian, half something. She used to work at CNN, and now she has an NGO that helps children in trauma zones like this. And she told a story. I think it was to CNN. She told a story about a mom who was talking to her and said that her young son, maybe 5 years old or something, hasn't slept through the night, had wets the bed, blah blah, blah all these signs of trauma since he saw, and this is how she put it, since he saw her sister's head explode. And then Arwa was, I'm pretty sure that's her name. Arwa was talking to the mom a little bit more, and finally she realized this lady also saw her daughter's head explode. And then this woman realized that Arwa had realized this, and she said, I understand, I know what you're thinking, but I have to stay calm because I have children who are still alive. That's, I mean, it's a remarkable feat that she's able to do that, but everybody has a limit, and everybody has a limit, even mothers. And it's so yeah, these are the things that people are living with. It's not only the trauma, it's not only the fact that they can't get healthcare, it's not only the fact that they can't get the actual surgeries or the prosthetics or anything else, but they're literally they've for a year they've been living in this existential dread. I mean, it's just they don't know where death is going to come from.
There's the fear too, right? The drones hovering over at all times. At any moment, you could be killed.
I remember there was a famous quote from a little, probably an anonymous little girl in Afghanistan when we were still occupying Afghanistan, and she said, we used to pray for a blue sky, but now we pray for overcast days because the drones can't shoot you during those times. Mm-hmm. This is just, what are we doing to children? I mean, this is, and just to be clear, every time I say Israel, I should say the United States and Israel, because it's not, Israel isn't doing any of this. We are doing this through, it's American planes with Israeli pilots. It's American, maybe they're Israeli drones, but they wouldn't be able to be. They're American tanks. It's American everything. Just happen to be used by Israelis.
And to be clear, these are their children now. Those who are fortunate will grow into adulthood and carry this trauma for their entire lives, carry these disabilities for their entire lives. I'm sure many of their life expectancies, again, those who survive, will be much shortened. You talked about in one of your pieces the quantity of rubble in Gaza. The amount of time it would take to rebuild to the condition it was in before, where it was a place with massive unemployment and poverty and few food insecurity. So these things have not just been going on for a year, but even if the war stopped tomorrow, the effects on human beings would last for decades.
Yeah. And just to go back to that same guy, Alex DeWall, that historian of famine, the way he puts it is that famine is a train. You can hit the brakes as hard as you want, but it's not going to stop immediately. And the same thing is true of the destruction of an entire society. I mean, we have to remember that at least I can't think of one, maybe unless you go back to like the Mongol raids or something like that. I can't think of a time when a society was this heavily destroyed in a year. I mean, can you? And certainly Germany during World War II doesn't qualify. Japan during World War II doesn't qualify. I really can't think, other than maybe like a local village that's very isolated and it was burned or something. Like that's literally the only close parallel I can think of. The whole place has been destroyed. I mean, I still remember I was there before the destruction of Khan Younis was completed, and I remember I got the opportunity to drive down to Rafah and then up through the Mawasi and then back through Khan Younis. And when we were coming back, I just had to say, I was like, stop the car for a sec, and just got out and I looked around. I was like, where the hell? Where are we? It doesn't. There's no buildings that are more than like 5 feet tall here. This is crazy. Like I remember thinking, if I had grown up in this house right here, I don't think I would know where I was. Mm. Like that's the level of destruction. It looked like a nuclear bomb hit the place. So anyway, the point is, it's a disaster, and it's going to be multi-generational with no question, with absolutely no question. Not only are these children traumatized, but they've been malnourished for a year. Their brains are not going to develop normally. And people often talked about the Palestinians just being serial killers and psychopaths and stuff. But if you wanted to make sure that there are people with serious problems, with serious difficulties concentrating, with serious difficulties understanding peaceful resolution of problems, now you've guaranteed it for an entire generation. In fact,
now, one of the things I want to do in this conversation is to just bring out and to emphasize the level of horror that is very easily preventable, because you've mentioned the lack of supplies, for instance. I mean, these are things where, I mean, the testimonies of your colleagues about how, the if you had just a basic functional medical system, people would be alive who have died. There's plenty that, and the conditions that you're working in, where people are not even able to wash their hands. Things that should be completely basic, and then result in it being so much worse than even the baseline condition of what happens when you drop 2,000-pound bombs in highly densely populated areas.
Yeah. Yeah, no. If Gaza had the equivalent of any third world healthcare system that I've ever worked in, there would be lots and lots of people who are alive who are now dead. There would be lots of people who are severely crippled who would have been minorly crippled or not at all. Yeah, no, that's clear as day. I was on some podcast with somebody else the other day. It was one of the other people who signed the letter, Monica. She said, the way she put it was, if I blew up your house and then said it was an accident, maybe somebody would believe me. But what if I then said an ambulance can't come to get you? It's not an accident anymore. That's just clear as day. I mean, that's not a hard analogy to understand. The Israelis have destroyed the healthcare system on purpose. This complete nonsensical thing about Hamas being under every hospital is just idiotic. I mean, when somebody writes like a history of this period, and they say that the American media just believe this utter nonsense about Gaza's hospitals being the Hamas's command and control centers. It's the fact that anybody believes it for 2 seconds will be just no one will believe that anybody could have been that credulous, there's no justification for it.
In one of the letters, I believe, your colleagues affirm that at no point did any of them see militants using medical facilities, which is the allegation that is used to justify the destruction of Gazan health facilities.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important to remember, not only did we not see it, anybody who has been there has never seen it. Mads Gilbert he's a Norwegian anesthesiologist and emergency physician. He worked in Shifa Hospital for, I believe, like 3 decades, like a very, very long time. He never saw this. The closest anybody has ever been able to get to Hamas using a hospital for military purposes was after the 2014 war, Operation Protective Edge. Hamas used an outpatient facility briefly as an interrogation and torture place, which obviously is not good. Like, that's not nice. But that doesn't justify blowing up the hospital in 2023. It's absurd. And then Amnesty International wrote a report about it because it was criminal. They didn't, no doubt about it. It was you can't. It wasn't really the use of the building so much so it was criminal as the torture. But yeah, it's just outrageous. Furthermore, if the presence of a Hamas person justifies blowing up a hospital, why doesn't the presence of any Israeli soldier justify blowing up a hospital? Does anybody accept that as legit? That's insane. Like I'm at work right now. If some general happens to walk by here, Russia can't just drop a bomb on my hospital. It's absurd. It's outrageous. That's not how international law works, and nobody claims it does. Like, literally, no one says that that's the way international law works.
This is kind of a funny thing to me about the accusation has always been, well, Hamas uses human shields, and the thing about using human shields is the whole reason it's supposed to be effective is because when someone uses a human shield, you're not supposed to shoot them. That's why a human shield works. If you just because we assume that people are humane enough to where they don't. It's an effective strategy, and it's very. But
the assumption is that people won't want to kill civilians and they'll hesitate. Exactly, and it's really funny. I was on a show with a guy named Noam Dorman.
Oh yes, I saw this.
Oh geez, oh gosh. I actually, to be fair, I thought it was a productive conversation. Not maybe in the way I didn't know who he was when I went there, so I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But I thought it was fine. But anyway, at one point I pointed out to, because he brought up the human shields thing, I pointed out to him that when Iran attacked the Mossad headquarters with ballistic missiles, there were CNN or somebody, I think it was CNN, went there and said, and they said, look, there's all these civilians around. how could Iran possibly safely attack this place? But nobody accused the Israelis of using human shields because that's not what the term means. Just because you built Mossad headquarters, yeah. I mean, you couldn't drop a nuclear bomb on Tel Aviv and say you were aiming at Mossad headquarters, but you can fire ballistic missiles at them if they have some reasonable point of accuracy. So that's just how the law. That's how war fighting and the laws around war fighting works. But with Hamas in Gaza, it's kind of funny because Hamas is constantly accused of using human shields, meaning their own people as human shields, which presupposes that the Israelis care about killing Palestinian civilians, which is ludicrous. This has nothing to do with this. Is totally ahistorical nonsense. But beyond that, it doesn't. If it's funny because Hamas is also accused at the same time of of wanting to get as many of its own civilians killed as possible. So okay, fine. But then at the same time, why is it that Israeli soldiers use human shields in Gaza and in the West Bank? If Hamas is trying to get as many of its people killed as possible, why would using Palestinians as human shields for Israelis work? It's just stupid. Like none of it doesn't even make any sense. Leaving aside, there's just no evidence for any of it. It's just ridiculous. And but anyway, sorry, I don't want to talk about that. But the point is just that the attack on the hospitals is just outrageous. It is one of the crimes of the century. And the fact that the Mayoran government is backing it to such a degree that they won't even meet with 99 physicians, they're not all physicians, but almost 100 doctors who wrote them a letter saying that they witnessed atrocities being carried out with our own weapons, and they won't even acknowledge the letter, and it's the second letter. It's ridiculous. And it's really shocking, honestly. It's beyond anything I ever thought would happen.
So you mentioned there yes, I watched your conversation with Noam Dorman, who's he's very pro-Israel, obviously, and although a relatively somewhat open-minded guy, he's had Norman Finkelstein on and stuff.
He seemed willing to listen. Yeah,
but the thing is that someone like that has imbibed a lot of talking points and propaganda and misconceptions, and I wonder if you could perhaps clear up what you think are some of the most. You've touched on a few of them. This idea that the hospitals are actually military bases. To clear up a few of what you think are the most pernicious talking points that people in this country who will only have read U.S. media, who won't have heard from many Palestinians, who unless they listen to Democracy Now, probably haven't heard from, or read current affairs, probably wouldn't have heard from you. What kind of misconceptions do they have about this conflict?
Yeah, one thing that was interesting is Noam mentioned to me, he said, it's not that he knew nothing about the Arab-Israeli conflict, but he said, I really started learning about it. That was how he put it, after October 7th. And I wish I had thought, I was trying to think, what is wrong with this? Like, why doesn't he know the most basic true facts about this conflict? It's very strange. And after when I got home, I kind of was thinking about it more. And I said, I should have told him this. No, if you studied something in school for a year, what would you spend the first year doing? Do you think you would spend it reading, random Israeli propaganda outfits like MEMRI or like listening to their translated videos? And does a first year master's student dive into primary sources, or do they read books? Just read a book on the conflict. I know there's a lot of them, fine. But just read one of the overall, there are lots of standard histories of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Mark Tessler's, Benny Morris's, I wouldn't call Norman Finkelstein's a standard history, it's not used in schools very much, but it's still very good. Noam Chomsky's Fateful Triangle. There are lots of, and there's plenty more. You could read them from a more, Tessler's is a very neutral perspective. He's an American professor. I'm not sure if he's still professing or not, but he was an American professor, I think, in Indiana. These books are available. It's not like they're hard to find. Benny Morris is a very right-wing guy. He's not subtle in his beliefs. But if you read the book from start to finish, you won't come to the same conclusions that he does. So it's just not that.
He's an odd guy because he says all of basically like all of the charges the leftists make are true, and that's a good thing.
But no, yeah, yeah.
Like the occupation is brutal,
for,
and yes, it's ethnic cleansing, and we should do more of it.
yeah, and you know, and he's an honest fellow. He's a very competent no, I mean really, he's a very competent archival historian. That's very obvious, and he's got an incredible memory. He has the patience to sit there and go through these archival sources. But and you know, somebody actually during he was having a discussion somewhere, and it was a pretty hostile audience, and you know, he was still there, which is good. But somebody at I think the last question was, if you were a Palestinian, would you fight the Israeli occupation? You said, "Oh yeah, no question. That's not a hard question to answer." So you know, and it's just he's an honest guy, but he's also fully enamored of his side. You know, what did Camus said something like, "You can never side against your own mother," or some stupid such thing when he was talking about French atrocities in Algeria.
Justice versus your mother,
yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'm sure you know better than I do. But but anyway, so the main, you know, it's hard to pick out a few because the Israel-Palestine conflict is shrouded in so much utter nonsense that it's really, honestly, it's very hard to peel back any one layer of it without having like a 5-hour discussion with somebody. But what I would just say is that maybe a few things. Number one, the Palestinians are presented with all of the subtlety of Godzilla in the American media. Like, it's like they just walked out of the ocean and started bombing Tel Aviv. It's crazy. There's a long history here, and you don't have to have a PhD in Middle Eastern studies to understand the history. Again, if you read any of the standard books on the topic, again, pick up Mark Tessler's book. I think it's called The History of the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. Yeah, it's long. You got to get through it. It's not particularly exciting. Just get through it. You will not come out of that book thinking, "Wow, the Palestinians sure hate Jews." That's not what it is. If you read the first edition of Righteous Victims, Benny Morris's book, you won't get that impression either. The second edition, you will, because he decided it's true. But you know, if you read Righteous Victims, if you read Border Wars and Benny Morris's other books, these books are quite straightforward. Yeah. They're not hard to understand. They're very, because kind of, well, you can see what happens with Morris when he's limited to the archival record. He comes up with a history and a conclusion that makes sense. When he reads the news and incorporates that into, because when he starts talking about current affairs, then it's just all my side. Yeah. But anyway, but yeah, I would just try to explain to people that the Palestinians are not just some bizarre anti-Semitic force of nature that loves killing people. It's like any other national liberation movement. They've done some very brutal things. There's no doubt about that. Like October 7th wasn't some joke, but suicide bombings are not some joke. But I want people should understand the vast differential of violence that exists in this conflict. So let me just say this. As an anecdote to that talking point, I suppose, because anytime you hear about violence, it's Palestinian violence. Israelis do bombings, they do shootings, the conflict kills people, but Israelis don't do violence, and they just kind of like the U.S. We don't do violence. That's what other people do. We don't do terrorism. That's what other people do. But let me just give this one statistic: more 2-year-old children are confirmed to have been killed. I'm not talking about my estimates for starvation or anything. I'm talking about confirmed. Their names are known to have been killed by violence. More children under the age of 2 in Gaza since October 7th have been killed than the entire number of Israeli civilians who were killed in the first Intifada, the second Intifada, and October 7th combined. That is shocking. That is absolutely and utterly outrageous. And there's no reason for it. There is absolutely no justification for this whatsoever. And people who want to claim that Hamas is always, it's just Hamas. Hamas killed all these kids. Hamas forced Israel to kill all these kids. It's insane. The power differential between these two sides is massive and vast. They are not on the same playing field at all. And to claim that Israel had to kill more 2-year-old kids than all Israeli civilians who were killed in the past 30 years combined, that's insane. These numbers, there's nothing that makes sense with any of these numbers. If you look at the, I did these calculations a few months ago, so the number, the exact differential will have changed. But if you look at the rate of killing of children in Gaza versus in Ukraine, the rate of children of killing in Gaza is 600 times higher than in Ukraine. Ukraine's being attacked by Russia. Russia, it's a huge country. People have probably heard of it. Like it's not. This isn't some joke that's going. Like Ukraine is a horrendous. I've been there 3 times, like I mentioned. It's very very bad. But it's not, and it's not. I actually have plenty of Ukrainians who who are friends of mine now. When I told them when I put on like my little Facebook page, I said I'm just letting my friends know I'm going to Gaza. They were like, no, don't do that, dude. Do not do that. Please just come back here instead. Don't go to Gaza.
So go to a safe place like Eastern Ukraine.
Well, yeah, no, I mean it's wild, I mean they because they're not idiots. I mean the Ukrainians were remarkably sophisticated people. I'm very very proud to have known them. I'm hoping I can go back soon, actually. But yeah, I mean it's insanity. The talking point I would just say that people should get out of their heads is just that this is not just something that is happening because Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
This Hamas, that Hamas, those Hamas, these Hamas. That's not what is going on. The United States and Israel have decided to destroy the Palestinian movement. That's all it is. They've decided to make sure that there is no Palestinian state. The U.S. is willing to let Israel do that so that it can continue to be its linchpin of control in the Middle East. That's all that's going on. It's not fancy. It's not super complicated.
I want to ask you 2 more quick questions. One is you published this New York Times op-ed, which was pretty remarkable for appearing in the New York Times. To be honest, I think some of us were quite surprised when that came out.
Me too.
But people tried to discredit you. All sorts of you pointed out that so many had seen children shot in the head. A lot of ballistics experts, quote unquote, popped up on Twitter to say this couldn't possibly happen. But actually, you have the evidence. The Times stood by the story. Did you encounter any resistance from the New York Times to saying what you said? Because your conclusion is not just, this is look at the tragedy, look at the suffering. Your conclusion in that piece is the United States must stop arming Israel, and we need to take a long, hard look at ourselves as Americans.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about the criticism of the piece, including even the 3 letters that they published, is that none of them actually seem to look at the conclusion. like the 3 letters are like, this is so, or the one letter said, I think he went too far in saying that we should stop arming Israel. It's like, okay, well, it's been a year, but that's fine. That's your opinion. The second was just a cri de coeur of like, how could we let such a horrible thing happen? And then the third, and I have to give the Times credit for publishing the opinion piece in the first place, but it kills me that they did this. The third was a letter from, I believe, the Jewish American Physicians Association or something, some such thing.
Yeah, the president of the Jewish American.
Jewish American Medical
American Jewish Medical,
whatever it is, that thing. And why is that the letter that they chose to publish? I mean, I understand that they sent it. That's fine, but what does what I said have to do with Jews? Nothing. It kind of, I'm sorry, it kind of pisses me off. Like you can see, this is not a conflict between Jews and other people, at least not in the United States. It's not. What is it? I can't remember the exact numbers now, but something like 40% of young American Jews not only think what Israel is doing in Gaza is wrong, but believe it's genocidal. That's a huge number. Right after the Times published our piece, Haaretz translated the entire thing into Hebrew and published it on their site as well. After that, just maybe like a few days ago, I just spoke to her on yesterday, maybe last Sunday or something like that. I got a letter from 150 Israeli, I think it's up to 250 now, by the way, 150 Israeli physicians endorsing our letter to the Biden administration. And that letter was sent not to Netanyahu, but to Biden. That's how desperate they are. And the Jewish American Medical Association president is saying that I'm being hurtful. Okay. Why don't you go talk to your Jewish colleagues in Israel and see what they think about it? Is there a majority opinion? No, of course not. Meaning the Israeli physicians. Of course, it's not a majority opinion. It's a very nationalistic and right-wing country now. But it's just setting this up as a conflict between Jews and other people. That's not what it is. Yeah. So that killed me. That really made me upset. But anyway, what I have to say is when I stood firm in wanting to say something with the Times, they would they would push back on a lot of things for sure, and which I wasn't surprised by. But I gotta be honest, I never expected that piece to be published.
Yeah.
I was absolutely sure that they were not going to publish it, and I would just end up putting it on Common Dreams or something. So I didn't feel the need.
But you did
to
have to have 65 people backing you up.
And and that's the thing, and it's so funny because people are, oh, look, see, we knew the Times is anti-Israel. If the Times was anti-Israel, this is what would have happened. There would have been 65 different pieces because they would have sought out doctors coming back from Gaza. There would have been 65 different pieces, meaning, for a year, 5 a month, saying this is what Dr. Feroze saw when he got back. This is what Dr. Syed saw when she got back. This is what Nurse Monica saw when she. It would have been like 60, 65 separate pieces about this, not one opinion piece, and they would have been news, but not just. So if they were anti-Israel, that's what they would have done. But I think this just got to the point that they couldn't ignore it, and they figured, and also, this is to the Times credit, or at least the credit of the visual opinion team. They reached out to me and asked me to write the piece. So that's, credit where credit's due. It should have been published a year ago, or not that exact piece, obviously, but something akin to it could have easily been published a year ago, and it honestly could have been published after Cast Lead and after Protective Edge. But I suppose better late than never.
Finally, I want to bring this conversation back to where we started, because I started with your letter to the Biden administration, the fact that you've gotten no response. You mentioned in one of your answers there that you believe it's pretty clear that the Biden administration has just made the decision that it is willing to let Israel obliterate any chance of Palestinian self-determination. Perhaps you could discuss, I mean, we're a few days away from the election. Many people are being called upon to go to the polls and put Kamala Harris in to succeed Joe Biden. Many are hopeful that what I might consider wishful thinking, that Kamala Harris will change this policy. So perhaps you could just say a few words about the last year of Biden administration policy and how difficult it's been to get really any movement or even acknowledgement from this White House.
Yeah, and it's frustrating, to be sure, but I think it speaks to the depravity of American politics in general. I mean, mainstream American politics, Democrats versus Republicans. We don't actually have this. This just kind of, I think it was jogging or something. This occurred to me the other day. We don't actually have a political party in the United States that is opposed to genocide on principle. That's wild. That's very scary. I mean, the United States is an incredibly powerful country. Yeah. We don't even have. Even the so-called left-wing party, the Democrats, are not opposed to genocide on principle.
I think the Green Party would want me to interject there.
Yes, the Green Party, of course, because Jill Stein has been very vocal about this, as has Cornel West, and which isn't surprising because something like 80% of the country wants us to stop sending arms to Israel. Yet, and on top of that, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and all the rest of these Democratic people, they've been going around for what? At least since Trump left office, probably since before, saying that Donald Trump is the greatest threat to American democracy that has ever existed. You hear it all the time from everywhere. I don't disagree with them, actually, in some ways. Right. But just think about it. All they had to do was say, and by the way, we're opposed to genocide, so we're going to stop sending arms to Israel. And they'd win this election with no question whatsoever by a mile. Every swing state would fall way onto the. I don't pay any attention to these kind of polling things just because it makes me want to jump off a roof. But so I don't know who's going to win the election. It's hard to tell. Is it close? Is it not close? I don't really care. And I shouldn't say that I do care, but I just don't have the bandwidth to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, all they had to do, or let me give you another example. Just maybe 2 weeks ago now, Israel announced to COGAT, which is the Israeli office that coordinates between humanitarian organizations and the Israeli military. They announced that they are going to cut, it was hard to get exact numbers, but either 6 or 8 international NGOs from access to Gaza, no longer allowed in. It's not hard to figure out what they were. Five of them were American, incidentally. I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but all five are registered American NGOs run by Americans, but with boards that have people who are of Arab ethnicity. That's it. That's all it is. Fudger Scientific, Palestinian American Medical Association, Palestinian American Bridge, and two others that I just can't remember the names of right now. And this was maybe a few days after the New York Times article came out. And even more shockingly, was just after the Biden administration had a letter leaked to the Times of Israel in which they said that they would not that Israel has to massively increase the amount of humanitarian aid going into Gaza, unless otherwise they're going to have to face possible consequences under NSM 20. Now Blinken immediately walked that back once the letter was released, but it doesn't matter. The point is, all Harris has to do is go out. She doesn't, even if she didn't come out against the attack, against arming Israel, she could just say, when I am president, all five of those NGOs will be immediately reinstituted, or Israel will give up arms. Everybody knows Israel would agree to let those people back in, just if they're not going to die on that hill. Why would they? That's absurd. They can still kill everyone in Gaza just because Fudger Scientific and Palestinian American Medical Association sent a few doctors in. It doesn't stop them from doing anything. She won't even do that.
Yeah.
That's just outrageous.
Commit to enforcing U.S. law.
Well, and that was something that I wrote in the piece. Was Peter Beinart, and also in the New York Times, again to their credit, in some ways, Peter Beinart has said he wrote a column in which he said Harris can differentiate herself from Biden by simply saying that she will enforce the law. That's some revelation that has to be mentioned in the New York Times before the executive department or the executive branch figures it out. That's wild.
Yeah.
That says something about our own culture, our own society, our level of understanding of the world, our level of what we're doing. Is the rule of law important or not? Does it only matter that people in poor black neighborhoods have to adhere to the rule of law, or does the president of the United States also have to do that? I mean, it's just totally indefensible. The whole situation is so outrageous. And it's very hard to fathom. We have a lot of work to do in our own kind. That's why I said the article there. That's why I wrote it. That article is not about Israel. People can claim it is. Yeah. People can claim it's anti-Israel, I don't care. I don't really care anymore. I'm tired of hearing it. But people can claim it is all they want. It's about the United States.
Yeah.
And it's as pro-American as you can get. It's not saying I didn't call for death to America. I called for us to take a look at ourselves. Yeah. Why are we acting like this? Why are we doing this? We ought not to. I think we can all. I think any sensible. When I was in Burkina Faso, just before the Democratic National Convention, and I gave a talk there, just a 5-minute talk, and I pointed out that the U.S. has kind of gone insane. I kind of likened it to the way the South resurrected slavery after the Civil War. And the whole society, everybody just knew what to say, when to say it, who to kill, who not to kill, who to beat up, who not to beat up, what laws really matter, what laws don't really matter. I just finished reading a book by Douglas Blackman on the topic, so it's on my mind. Slavery by Another Name, right? It's a very good book. And I pointed out that I kind of see the same collective insanity taking hold here now. And it's not just the South, obviously. Now it's the whole country. And I had been in Burkina Faso, which is this very, very small, poor country just north of Ghana. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. I was just there for a week. And I mentioned, when I was going around doing NGO work for my buddy's NGO, Pull for Progress, and we at some point, we were at the university. There were a lot of people who spoke English, and so they were talking to me and they said, "Oh, do you only come to Burkina Faso, or do you go other?" I said, "No, I've been in Ukraine and the West Bank, and I was in Gaza recently." And they stopped and they said, "Oh, you were in Gaza," and then they would just say, "Can you explain why America is doing this?" This was like a universal response. I was very surprised by how sophisticated they were in regards to this specific issue, because they don't get any international news there. Yeah, why is America doing this? They didn't ask about Israel. They didn't. They said, "Why is America doing this?" And it's a very hard question to answer. We really have a lot of work to do with ourselves, and I'm glad magazines like yours exist, because I know you guys are. I don't read current affairs every day, but you guys are definitely trying to put out to make people come to these ideas.
Oh, well, and I actually just have to mention that because We just released last week this new book, which is with Noam Chomsky, called "The Myth of American Idealism: How U.S. Foreign Policy Endangers the World." The central message
there
of
you go.
that
That's actually
Professor Chomsky and I collaborated on was, the central message of that book is that America needs to take a long, hard look at itself, and there's a long chapter about Israel Palestine in that.
And the title of that book is really the central theme of I would say all of Chomsky's work for a long time, or his political work. It's true. American foreign policy it's not the only problem in the world, certainly, but it is very, very, very dangerous. It's not. I don't think people have a full appreciation of how bad and how dangerous and how close the world stays virtually all of the time to ultimate destruction. Right. And it's very scary.
Meanwhile, completely convinced
know better than I do
of our own righteousness and nobility and devotion to
our leaders are. And I know Noam's had a stroke, so he can't speak for himself. I certainly don't want to speak for him, but I do think that he would point out that if that was an intrinsic feature of our society, then billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in an entire industry wouldn't have to be dedicated to convincing people of it.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of opportunity for us to do something about it.
Yeah, when we say America, we're often talking about the state.
Right.
The state is insane. The people often just don't know anything about what's actually being done.
And there's a reason, and it's hidden because it's deliberately hidden from them. Yeah, they're deliberately confused. And I think journals like Current Affairs have a lot to contribute to.
Well, this is why we're talking to you and why we're trying to talk to people who have actually seen these things up close, because the stories are often buried. I would encourage every one of our listeners and readers to go to GazaHealthcareLetters.org, and I would encourage you to read every word of the letters that Dr. Sidhwa and his colleagues have sent to the Biden-Harris administration, repeatedly explaining exactly what they witnessed, explaining exactly the changes that need to be put in place, from the broad change of an arms embargo and the imposition of a ceasefire, and they explain why we can, in fact, impose a ceasefire, but also particular changes, like just making sure that basic adequate medical supplies are allowed into Gaza, that healthcare workers, that Palestinian healthcare workers aren't discriminated against, various things that our administration could do, and that there needs to be major political pressure on them to do. So, Dr. Sidhwa, we thank you so much for your work, not only the work that you did in Gaza, but also the work that you've done subsequently in tirelessly trying to draw attention to what is being done in Americans named by their government.
Thank you.